And now we suffer. Welcome to From Center Ice, the shorthanded series where it is just me, Courtney, talking to you about hockey things, because that is what we do here. So today, we are going to talk about suffering, because that is what I do best when it comes to this dumb sport that we love for some reason. What we're not going to talk about today is goaltending, because that is going to be a whole separate episode all in itself, because I have a lot of feelings. That will be the very next episode that comes out, so make sure you stay tuned for that one. So, it's been a few weeks since I last uploaded an episode, because the hockey took hold of my brain. So, I don't know about you, but hockey, especially playoff hockey, makes me beyond superstitious. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because the players are so superstitious, it just kind of rubs off on the fans. I don't know. But hockey makes me so superstitious. It's crazy when the Blackhawks go deep in the playoffs. Thankfully, my brain hasn't had to suffer through that type of superstitious torture in a few years. Of course, I'd rather have a Stanley Cup over what we haven't been able to achieve, but that's a whole different topic. So, I had planned on recording an episode after Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final, obviously featuring the Dallas Stars and the Tampa Bay Lightning, but Dallas won that game, and I was rooting for Dallas, which probably comes as a shock to most people who know me because I do not like the Dallas Stars. I had a reason for rooting for them. We will get to that in a moment. So anyway, I was rooting for Dallas, so then I figured it was a sign that I couldn't record to talk about the final since Dallas had won that night when I was planning on recording and didn't. So obviously, that was proven wrong when Tampa went on to win 3 straight and eventually went on to win the Stanley Cup in 6 games. Maybe I should have recorded an episode during that time. Maybe the roles would have been reversed, but we will never know. Hindsight is 2020, like this stupid year that we are in. Are you over 2020? I'm over 2020. So the funny thing is I had actually recorded a version of this very podcast episode on Tuesday, but I was listening back to it and I didn't like it at all. I was tired and undercaffeinated and it just wasn't very exciting. I basically bored myself listening back to it. So if I was able to bore myself, I didn't want to put it out and then put anybody to sleep who was listening to this in their ear holes. So yeah, it just wasn't good. So here I am re-recording it. I am more caffeinated this time, and I took a few more notes so that I won't miss any of the points that I wanted to hit. And maybe I'm putting this out almost a week later than I had originally planned, but oh, buddy, I am glad that I waited. So, before we jump into who won, obviously I already mentioned it was Tampa, I just want to say I am amazed that the NHL was actually able to pull this off. If you have been listening to us since this whole shutdown thing started, we were very skeptical, Jacqueline and I, about whether hockey would even come back at all or whether they would be able to last the whole playoffs without having to cancel it. We didn't think they'd be able to pull it off because that would be the most NHList thing ever, to have this idea to return to play and then somehow mess up their own plans. And I mean, I wouldn't really blame them that much this time since it is a worldwide pandemic, but alas, we didn't have any faith in the NHL. They've never given us a reason to have faith in them. And if you are a hockey fan, you obviously know that as well. I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. But they did it. The NHL pulled off the 24-team return to play plan that they set in place, and the cup was awarded. So, I mean, hats off to the NHL. It obviously wasn't the perfect plan because the players had to stay locked up in their hotel, and after the cup was awarded, we heard that, I mean, it gets pretty lonely in there and you have some dark days and all that. So that's the unfortunate side of it. The fortunate side was that we will never have to be like, who would have won the cup in 2020? Or hand it to the Bruins because they were the reigning President's Trophy champs when the season stopped, or whatever the hell was being said. We do have a 2020 Stanley Cup champion, and in getting there, there were 0 positive COVID-19 tests once the NHL moved into their 2 bubble cities, of course, Edmonton and Toronto. Both of those teams, or not both of those teams, both of those cities did a fantastic job keeping the players safe, keeping COVID out of the bubbles, and the NHL did a great job of dressing up the arenas to make it not look so depressing. I think I mentioned this on one of the first episodes I put out once the NHL came back, but I'm glad that it didn't just show empty seats on the broadcast. That would have just looked so sad. So the fact that they put the coverings over the seats with the logos on it, I don't know, I liked it a lot. It looked nice. Obviously, it would have been better if there were fans there. It doesn't replace that type of setting. But with what they had to work with, I thought they did a really good job. The fan noise they pumped into the broadcast, maybe not as great, but I didn't really notice it. I know some people really hated it. It just kind of seemed normal to me because you hear the fan noise during any regular time when sports are going on. So that part didn't bother me. Watching football now, the crowd noise that they're pumping in is super loud. I don't know, after watching some of these other teams playing, how they could mess that up so poorly, but I feel like the NHL had a good balance of music and on-ice sounds and the crowd noise. So that part didn't bother me. I thought they did a good job with that, but I could see why it would be annoying to some people, because obviously there's no crowd there, and yet there's cheering and all that. So with what they had to work with, I thought they did a pretty decent job pulling it off. There were a few weird things. One of those being that because there's no crowd noise, obviously the voices on the ice are easier to hear. So it was put on a couple second delay, I want to say. So if there were expletives thrown around on the ice, they would be able to bleep those out for the poor innocent ears of the fans listening at home who can't hear swear words, apparently. And whenever they would do this, the music would get all jumbled and played backward. So that was a very weird experience. The refs' mics didn't always work when they were announcing penalties. Sometimes it sounded like a demon was speaking through the microphones. And so some of the sound was just weird. I feel like a lot of that is attributed to cutting out some of the expletives, like I said before. So that was a weird experience. And also, when a team scored a goal, you kind of had to wait for the players on the ice to celebrate if it wasn't a clear cut. You see the puck enter the net. So that was weird, because usually you can judge by the crowd's reaction whether or not there is a goal, but sometimes you're just watching, like, I think that went in, and you're not really sure until you see the players celebrate, and obviously the ref pointing toward the back of the net. So that was weird. And then sometimes there's a goal and you don't even know how it happened. You're like, I don't know how that puck found its way into the net, but there it is. And it's just all sorts of confusion. So that was interesting. But again, overall, I think that they did a really good job, and hats off to them. It's going to be interesting to see how they proceed with the 2020-2021 season. There most likely, I would assume, will not be fans in the seats, at least for the start of the season, maybe sometime down the road, if we do hit a vaccine or if numbers are somehow manageable enough to have larger crowds. I don't really know how that would work. It's just all very unknown, and it's even unknown when the season will even start. So, that all being said, the Tampa Bay Lightning are your 2020 Stanley Cup champions. Now, it's about time that they finally won the cup. They've been one of the best teams in the league for years, and of course, they made it to the Stanley Cup final in 2015, losing to my very own Chicago Blackhawks by the same score that they beat Dallas with in Game 6, and they also lost in Game 6, so that was kind of funny. And there was a tweet going around comparing the two goals that were scored in that game, and they looked pretty close to the one Chicago scored on them in Game 6 in 2015. So that was all just a very weird coincidence. But they finally got their cup. You gotta feel good for them. It was weird to see the celebration on the ice with no fans in the stands. It was really quiet. Not all of their families were able to make it, so that celebration was smaller. A lot of guys were on FaceTime talking to their family on their phones or through video chatting. So that was just kind of a sad thing to watch. At one point, Vasilevsky was talking to his family over FaceTime or whatever video chat service he was using, and he was just kneeling next to the cup so they could see it, and just that visual alone made me so sad for him, because he was obviously lights out in the playoffs. Andrei Vasilevsky is a fantastic goaltender, so he goes through all of that, puts up an amazing performance, and his family can't even be there with him, so I don't know, that part was all very sad. I'm sure that they're happy and they'll take the cup win over anything, but it sucks that they don't get that typical celebration on the ice with more of their families there. Of course, every year, not everybody's able to make it, but there's more people usually in attendance. So that was a very strange thing to watch. There weren't fans cheering them on in the background. It was really quiet, like I said. I don't know. It was weird, but good for Tampa finally getting their cup. But then, and this is why I said I was glad that I waited to post this episode, the videos start coming out from the cup celebrations with the team. And I'm not talking about the locker room celebration or anything like that. I'm talking about once they got the cup back to Florida, and we should have all seen this coming. A lot of us did see this coming, but there were absolutely no precautions being taken when celebrating the cup. I know Alex Killorn was out there with it and with fans. I don't recall who any of the other players were, but they were just letting fans drink out of the cup. They were celebrating with him, and then Killorn made a speech thanking the governor of Florida for opening all of the bars to 100% capacity in time for the team to get back to Florida and celebrate. That was rather disappointing. If that had been my team that won the cup, and then in the middle of a pandemic with a highly contagious virus, they decided to go out on the town, no masks in sight, and be drinking out of the cup and spreading it around and pouring it into just random people's mouths, I wouldn't be happy with them. So it's not just like it's not my team that won the cup, so screw those guys. No, it's extremely irresponsible. Florida has already been a hotbed for this damn thing. And then they go back and do this. That was, just unsettling and upsetting and disappointing, I guess is the best word for it. Just disappointing. And again, I get it. They went through this whole bubble thing. They were alone in the hotel for a couple months. They want to get out. They want to celebrate. They finally won the fucking Stanley Cup. They want to be able to celebrate it, just like every other team has that's won the cup. But this isn't a normal year. We are in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. It is not a normal year. You guys had to play in bubbles for a reason, and now you're out just being careless. I don't know. It's disappointing. So we haven't seen videos of them in a little bit. It's been at least a few days since I've seen one circulating. So I don't know if I'm just not seeing them or they're not being talked about as much. Obviously, there's a lot more going on in the world, especially right now since Friday. I'm not going to dive into the politics of everything, but we all know there is a lot going on, so that might be overshadowing what is happening in Tampa with these celebrations. But at the end of the day, it's just disappointing, and I get it, but these aren't normal times. You'll have your time to celebrate. Right now is not it. At least with the general public. Stay with the team that you've been bubbled up with. Celebrate with your friends. This team isn't going to come back 100% intact. You're not going to have all the same guys. Just celebrate what you were able to accomplish together, and once it is safe to do so, then you can invite people in from the outside to celebrate with you. Now, I had stated that I was rooting for Dallas, which was unexpected by many. It was unexpected by me. I went back and forth on this a lot when I figured out who the final two teams were going to be. I didn't know who I was going to root for. I didn't really want to root for either of them. But at the end of the day, my deciding factor goes back to the one trade the Blackhawks have made that I cannot get over and will never get over. And that is the trade that sent Patrick Sharp and Stephen Johns to Dallas for Ryan Garbett and Trevor Daley. So, Stephen Johns still being with Dallas was my deciding factor. He was one of my favorite Ice Hogs while he was here, and he was only with the Hogs for one full season, which I didn't realize going into this. I went to look up his stats. I was like, one season? Really? It felt like a lot longer. I don't know if it's just because I liked him so much or he was highly touted coming out of college. I don't really know. But he hadn't played since game 1 of the first round. He's struggled through injuries. And if you've heard any of his story, he missed a whole season with Dallas due to post-traumatic headaches, and he went through a really hard time with that injury, and because of that was experiencing suicidal thoughts, and it was just a very dark time in his life. So I couldn't not root for this guy. He was one of my favorite players while he was here, and then he came back from basically the depths of hell to come back and play hockey and get back to where he loved to be. And unfortunately, he missed out on most of the playoffs due to injury again, but he was able to come back. So, little background on Stephen Johns. He was a second-round pick by the Blackhawks in 2010. He joined the Ice Hogs in 2013-14 for 8 games after he finished his college career at Notre Dame. He played one full season, like I said, with the Ice Hogs. That was in the 14-15 season. He played 51 games for them and put up 4 goals and 17 assists. But in 8 games in 8 games in the playoffs that year, he had 3 goals and 4 assists for 7 points, so almost a point per game player in the playoffs. And then after that season, 2014-15, that's when the Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup against said Tampa Bay Lightning. And they had to clear some cap because the Blackhawks always find themselves in cap hell, and that's the price you pay for success, unfortunately. So that meant shipping Patrick Sharp and his cap hit down to Dallas, but they had to sweeten the deal by sending Stephen Johns along with him, and I was beyond angry. I thought he would be captain of the Ice Hogs. I knew he would make an impact on the Blackhawks blue line. From going to games and seeing him play for the Ice Hogs, he always seemed to be communicating with his teammates on the ice, telling his D partner where to go, and he was just very communicative. He seemed super smart, had really good hockey knowledge, knew where to be on the ice, and he just really impressed me every time I was able to see him on the ice. And then I had all these high hopes, and he's traded away in a cap dump trade. I can't get over it. I cannot get over it. When you think of the one Blackhawks trade that you cannot get over, most people default to Artemi Panarin for Brandon Saad, or sending Teuvo Teravainen to Carolina with Brian Bickle's contract. And while those were clearly upsetting, this is the one that has stuck with me. I don't know if it's because our defense is just absolute shit right now, or if it is just because I liked him so much as a player. I don't really know. But this is the one trade that I cannot get over. I understand the other two. I know why they happened. I didn't like them when they happened, of course. But this one, while I get they had to dump Patrick Sharp's contract, nope. So, like I said, we got Ryan Garbett, who gave us 43 games with 2 goals and 4 assists, and Trevor Daley, who was in Coach Q's doghouse the entire time he was with the Blackhawks. He played 29 games for the Hawks before being traded to Pittsburgh, and the cherry on top of that sundae is he won back-to-back cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So I don't know why Q didn't like him, but clearly he was a serviceable D-man that we probably should have held on to. And unfortunately for him, after winning back-to-back cups, he has been suffering in Detroit. So it didn't work out great for him now, but he has his Stanley Cup, so I think he's doing okay. So, it pains me to talk about that trade every time. And that was my deciding factor for rooting for Dallas in the 2020 Stanley Cup Final, and they let me down, just like every other team I was rooting for in these playoffs once the second round started. Every team that I was rooting for lost their series. I was rooting for Vegas in the conference final. Obviously, I should have just been rooting for Dallas from the get-go, then I wouldn't have had this situation. And it's just, I shouldn't have been making any picks this season, apparently, because it just didn't go very well. But now that the playoffs are over, the cup has been won, there are hockey moves to be made, and the Chicago Blackhawks have made 2 of them so far. The first move that they made was sending Dylan Sakura to the Las Vegas Golden Knights, or I guess the Vegas Golden Knights, for Brandon Pirri. Yep, take a second for that one to just sink in. We have once again traded for a guy who used to play in our franchise. It wouldn't be a Blackhawks offseason if we didn't do this, right? Right. I didn't think that Pirri would ever be one of the guys coming back, especially after the #FreePirri incident. So that's rather interesting. He is still the leading point getter in Ice Hogs history, so if he doesn't stick in the NHL, and he does end up back with the Ice Hogs, he gets to just add to his legacy down here in Rockford, which will be interesting since he wanted out of Rockford, which is how the trade came to be. It's weird. And he was with Vegas and the Chicago Wolves last season, and in 38 games with the Chicago Wolves, he put up 35 points. I'm pretty sure every single one of those points came against the Ice Hogs. Okay, I guess obviously that isn't possible, but it sure seemed like it was, because every time he was on the ice against the Piggies, he was doing something, and it was making me mad. So I guess it's a good thing that he is back with us, so he cannot just keep scoring on the Ice Hogs and digging that knife further into my soul. Obviously, he wouldn't be with the Chicago Wolves this year since Vegas moved their affiliate to Henderson, Nevada for the Silver Knights. So he would be out there, and the Wolves are now affiliated with the Carolina Hurricanes. Still doesn't make any sense to me, but it is what it is. So that was the first trade that they made. It will be very interesting to see what happens with that. I'm not totally upset with trading Dylan Sikura away. I'm interested to see what that means for his brother, because Tyler was the captain for the Ice Hogs this past season. So I'm wondering if, since his brother was traded, he will want to leave the organization. I guess that's still to be determined. I would have rather the Hawks went out and acquired a defenseman with that trade, or maybe a draft pick. I don't see a spot for Pirri on this roster, but maybe he will prove me wrong. I've been proven wrong in the past. I would love to be proved wrong. I just don't see it. We need more help on defense at the NHL level. We do have a lot of young guys coming up, so I get that they probably want to give those guys some NHL time. I don't know. I would just have rather they done that or gotten a younger forward, but it is what it is. Maybe the trades just weren't there. Maybe they tried and they weren't there, so you gotta get what you can get. And we got a guy who's shown he can produce at the AHL level at least, so if he is in Rockford, then hopefully he doesn't just have a complete off-season and not get any points. That would be our luck entirely. Before I go down that rabbit hole of misery and, once again, suffering, which is what we are talking about in this podcast episode. That was point one for my suffering, was bringing back Brandon Pirri in this weird-ass trade. Trade number 2 happened just a couple hours ago, actually, so I guess it's another good thing that I waited to record this podcast episode. Obviously, it would have just been recorded in the next one that went. Whatever. It's fine. The Blackhawks traded Olli Maatta to the LA Kings for forward Brad Morrison. This seemed to come out of absolutely nowhere. I saw it in a random tweet, and I don't remember who tweeted it out. I'm sorry, I can't give you credit, but they said, I don't know why I'm not seeing this anywhere else. Here's the source, and it was a link to NHL.com. So it's like, well, it must be legit. And then eventually, the Blackhawks did tweet out the trade. It is legit. This is a thing that did happen. Still out of nowhere, but they traded Olli Maatta to the Kings. They get rid of all but $750,108 that they retained of Maatta's $4,083,333 cap hit for the next 2 years. I don't know why they retained such a random amount of money. The Kings have cap space, so I don't know. It's the Blackhawks. That's all I got for you. And Brad Morrison's cap hit is just shy of 750K and is up at the end of the 2020-21 season. So it can be buried. He played in the ECHL last year. I don't see him making a jump from the East Coast League to the NHL, but stranger things have happened. Likely a guy that plays either in Indy or in Rockford. So this season with Chicago, Olli Maatta played 65 games. And he didn't really seem to click in every single game, but I'm not going to place the blame on him for that. The defense as a whole was a clusterfuck the entire year, only being saved by the goaltenders. And again, we're not talking about goaltending in this episode, so that's all I will say about that. But he had 4 goals and 13 assists in the regular season. Obviously a shortened regular season, we all know that, whatever. He was pretty solid in his own zone, which is what he's there for as a defenseman, but in the 9 quote-unquote playoff games, he had 3 goals and 3 assists, so 6 points in 9 quote-unquote playoff games. That includes the play-in round against Edmonton, and he was a +7, which I don't take plus minus into account for most things, but I was surprised when I looked at that and saw he was a +7, especially with how many goals were scored in that Edmonton series and also in that first game against the Vegas Golden Knights. So that was an interesting little tidbit that I found. During the regular season, like I said, he was just kind of there. I wasn't upset with the acquisition. I didn't necessarily like his cap hit, but he's only 26 years old. I forget that that's a thing because he's a 2-time Cup winner with Pittsburgh. So he was on the same Cup-winning teams as Trevor Daley. Oh, it all comes full circle in this episode, doesn't it? But in the playoffs, he really stood out. I thought he had a really fantastic playoff run with the Hawks, obviously putting up 6 points. He had some really timely goals. So if that's the type of play he takes into next season, the Kings are getting a good defenseman. And I was kind of wondering why the Kings would be interested in this trade, since it really did seem to come out of nowhere. But I took a look at their cap-friendly page, and it started to make some more sense. They do have the cap space. They have a little over $13 million in cap space. And now they don't have to re-sign their 2 UFA defensemen if they don't want to, in Ben Hutton and Joachim Ryan. So now they have 6 NHLD on their roster, being Drew Doughty, now Olli Maatta, Sean Walker, Michael Anderson, who I've never heard of. He's apparently a rookie. Okay. Curtis McDermott and Matt Roy. So once I took a look at their decor, I understood why they may want a guy in Olli Maatta who has been there, has the experience like Drew Doughty, also a 2-time Stanley Cup winner, and can add some veteran knowledge and experience on the back end at 26. It's kind of funny how we talk about these guys. Yeah, it's just kind of silly. He's in his mid-20s and he's a veteran on the team. It's just kind of wild. I think this is a trade that does end up working out for both teams. Chicago really needed the cap space. They have a few guys that they have to re-sign. And the Kings needed defense. They were one of the last place teams in the league, and that's why they're drafting, I want to say, are they drafting second? Second or third? I believe it's second, with Ottawa being third. I know Detroit got screwed and they dropped. Obviously, the Rangers got lucky. They're picking first overall. Oof. So the Kings needed defense. They now have another defenseman. I'm sure maybe they will make some more acquisitions in this weird offseason that is when the regular season should be starting. Who knows? So once I took a look at the Kings decor, I went over to the Chicago Blackhawks cap-friendly page to take a look at their defensive core. And it's interesting. So the guys still under contract are Duncan Keith, Calvin DeHaan, Connor Murphy, Adam Boqvist, and Nick Seeler. We do still have Brent Seabrook's ghost haunting them with his unmovable, ridiculous contract. This isn't a storyline I'm looking forward to following this offseason. I know that he wanted to come back and play. Who knows if he's going to be able to? If he is able to, is it going to be with the Blackhawks? If it is with the Blackhawks, what is he going to look like? I got very used to not seeing Brent Seabrook back there on defense during this return to play series and in the regular season games that he missed due to surgery, and I didn't hate it. So now we are back to suffering through this storyline of Brent Seabrook and his disastrous contract. And if he is able to return to play, and it is not with the Blackhawks, do they buy him out and have that cap hit to work around for the next million years, or do they somehow trade that contract? And if they do somehow trade that contract, what on God's green earth are they going to have to send the other way to sweeten that deal? It is going to be probably worse than the Tavo add-in to Carolina and the Stephen Johns add-in to Dallas, and I am just not looking forward to this at all. So there's some more suffering for you if you needed to hear it. That was a tangent. I didn't really mean to go off on that extensively. So yeah, the Blackhawks decor for the guys currently under contract who were in the NHL: Duncan Keith, Calvin DeHaan, Connor Murphy, Adam Boqvist, again, Nick Seeler, ? Slater Cuckoo is a restricted free agent. I could see the Hawks re-signing him. I was very happy with his playoffs with the Hawks. I would be very glad to have him back as long as it's not a stupid contract, which who knows? Who knows? We have a few guys to re-sign this year, and who knows what their contracts are going to look like, and it's terrifying, and ugh. So they can also call on one or more of Dennis Gilbert, Ian Mitchell, who is expected to be in the Blackhawks lineup, but he obviously hasn't played for them yet, so I have him on this list. Dennis Gilbert, Ian Mitchell, Lucas Carlson, he did spend some time in the NHL. Nicholas Beaudin got called up to be kind of a black ace, and there's also Chad Chris on the roster if they want to give him a shot. The ones I see most likely getting a shot are Ian Mitchell, that's kind of a given, Gilbert and Carlson. The other two I could see taking another year or two in Rockford, but who really knows? The draft is coming up this week. Free agency begins on October 10th, and then what? We don't know when training camp's going to start. There were rumblings that it's going to be mid-November. Who knows? Who knows how that's going to work? How are they going to start the season? Are they going to be traveling? They can't do a bubble for the whole regular season. That would be asinine. But the traveling hasn't really worked for other sport leagues. There's just recently been announced some positive COVID cases in the NFL. Obviously, baseball went through that as well, so traveling isn't the best option, but being in a bubble isn't going to be possible for the whole regular season, or even half of the regular season. So we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen, and that's really the main point of the suffering that I mentioned, is when we had this stoppage of play from March to August 1st, it was kind of always expected that the NHL was going to come back and play the playoffs. It wasn't necessarily accepted, by teams, players, and fans alike, but the NHL seemed very determined to come back, and they did make it happen. And of course, they're going to want to play the 2020-21 season, but they want to get in a full 82-game season, and they're going to have to make that happen somehow, sort out the logistics, and I don't know how it's going to work, when it's going to happen. Everything is so up in the air right now. I'm hoping that maybe they'll give us some sort of idea of what they're planning during the festivities coming up, being the draft, and then when free agency opens. But I don't know. We don't know anything, really. We don't know when we're going to have hockey back. We don't know what it's going to look like when hockey is back. It's even more up in the air for the American Hockey League, a league that really depends on butts in seats to operate. It's just all really unknown, and it's rather upsetting because, I mean, obviously if you're listening to a hockey podcast and you've listened to me drone on about this for 40 minutes now, you really like the sport of hockey, and it sucks that we don't know when our favorite sport will be back. Thankfully, in the meantime, there is football and things of that sort, but it just doesn't compare to watching hockey every night, of course. So I look forward to getting some more news. The players' signings will be interesting. At least during this stoppage, we'll have player movement news during the, well, I shouldn't say stoppage, during this off-season. We'll have player movement news during the actual stoppage. We couldn't have any player movement or news of that sort with signings because they had to take the same teams into the playoffs. So it'll be a little different. This will feel more like a real off-season. We just don't know how long the off-season's going to be or when the off-season's going to end. And for big hockey fans like yourself and for me and for Jacqueline and even for all the players, it's upsetting. It'll be nice to have some clarity on how they expect things to go. And I hope we don't have to wait too long, but these guys do deserve an off-season after pouring their souls into the playoffs. Sorry to those few teams who just haven't been able to play since March. Don't know what the NHL's gonna do for you guys, but sorry. Sucks to suck, I guess? I don't know. So that's where I'm going to end this episode. If you do enjoy From Center Ice, please, please, please go over to Apple Podcasts and give us a rating and a review. It would make my day. So if you could do that, I would greatly appreciate it. And the next episode, as promised, will be all about goaltending. I gotta put my notes together for that one and kind of rein in my thoughts that have been flying all over the place, kind of like the flying monkeys in The Wizard of Oz, except with no real aim or goal or intention. So it's been a wild ride in this brain of mine. I will try to put it into a more structured format so I can deliver my thoughts better. But maybe it will just be a half hour to an hour of me just screaming. No actual words, just screaming into the void, because that's kind of what I feel like doing when I think about goaltending this off-season and heading into the 2021 season. So there's a little teaser for you on that. Thank you so much for tuning in this week, and I will catch you next time. Bye! Thank you all for watching. Please hit that subscribe button to catch more From Center Ice content. If you could, hit the like button on this video, maybe share it with a friend or two. And while you're here, check out the podcast playlist and catch up on some old episodes. We will catch y'all next time. Bye!